And this story is about Sam Seder and Emma Vigilant's interview that they had with Ilhan Omar. And there were some moments that gave me pause because I noticed there were parts where I felt like they sincerely should have pushed back on Ilhan Omar, and they did not do so. And I will say this. If you are afraid to push back on people that come onto your show because you're afraid that you may lose some type of access to them, and particularly the ones who are politicians, then lose the access. As a politician, they should be able to handle tough questions. They should be used to being asked tough questions. And if they think that they're going to get a softball interview when they come onto your show, of course they're going to continue to come on, but they shouldn't be afraid to receive some type of criticism to their face. Let's check this out.
I want to welcome back to the program Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. Congresswoman, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam.
We get a bunch of stuff that we want to talk to you about, but let's start with student debt, because I know you're deeply involved in this. I think since the last time we spoke to you, well, it's certainly been since the last time we spoke to you. I'm sure you're aware, President Biden found it. I mean, I think the last time we spoke, we were asking where the memo was from the Department of Education. I don't even know what the stat. They found it, and it turns out he can do it, and he did it at least to some degree. $10,000 for everyone under making under $125,000 as an individual, $250 for a couple, $20,000 if you were the recipient of a Pell Grant. I have a sense, I know the answer to this question, but what do you think about that debt relief?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've been a champion in trying to get complete student debt cancellation, but this is significant. 43 million of the 45 million who have student debt will feel some relief. 20 million of those will have their student debt wiped out. And so, the day that it was announced, I was getting text messages from people who in my district who have been part of that movement, who've been campaigning alongside me to try to get student debt cancellation in tears, because, the amount of debt that they had would ultimately be canceled by the time this is processed. So we are grateful that the president, did find the memo. That he did carry out the promise he made to me end of March when I met with him in the White House, that he will move some sort of student debt cancellation, and ultimately did keep his campaign promise.
That is incorrect. Listen to this part right here. And they don't push back on this. This is exactly what I'm talking about. They did not push back.
The memo that he did carry out the promise he made to me end of March when I met with him in the White House, that he will move some sort of student debt cancellation, and ultimately did keep his campaign promise.
No, he didn't. Sam and Emma don't push back on this, by the way. That was not his campaign promise. His campaign promise, and I went over this on this show multiple times. I went back to the original website and showed you what the campaign promise was. The campaign promise was for him to cancel student debt for everyone that went to an HBCU that made under $125,000 a year. He was supposed to cancel all of their debt. The other part of that promise, for everyone that attended a state university and made under $125,000 a year, he was supposed to cancel all of the student loan debt. That was the campaign promise. The campaign promise was not $10,000 or to $20,000. It's still on the website. Eric, if you can find that, let me know, because I forget where I put that link. They don't push back on this. That's Ilhan Omar, a politician in Congress, giving you incorrect information on your show that has over 1 million subscribers, and you did not push back on her about an incorrect statement that she just made about student loan debt. Let's go on.
Do you think that's the end of it? I mean, because I have to, or let me ask you a subsidiary question. Do you think they were surprised at how little pushback there was? I mean, it seemed like it was a story in the news for, I don't know, 36 hours, 48 hours. Obviously, it helped him in the polls. I mean, I think there's like direct evidence of that, that his approval rating went up, particularly amongst young people. It's probably going to help the Democrats writ large in November.
No. So this interview took place last week, by the way. Okay. All right. So he says it's probably going to help the Democrats large in November. Guys, we reported about this on RBN last week. The statement came from Chuck Schumer, where Chuck Schumer said Democrats should still be worried about the midterms because he's not completely confident that they are going to win in the midterms. Why? Because a lot of the people who had the student loan debt forgiveness, the 10K to the 20K, especially a lot of the younger people, don't vote in the midterms. Most of us just come out for the presidential election. That's part of the problem. Number two, even the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade, it's not giving the push that people like Chuck Schumer thought it was going to give. Chuck Schumer commented on this recently. So I don't understand. Again, I don't know if they're just not doing their research or if it's just because they don't want their audience to know. This is why I tell you, you have to do your own research. This is terrible.
But in terms of pushback, it seemed to have gone away. Like there was Ted Cruz went out there and said, why are we giving basket weavers, majors? And then they realized like, oh my God, it turns out there's 45 million basket weavers in this country. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Like, do you think they were A, surprised by the lack of pushback, and B, do you have a sense that like there's going to be a sequel?
That's also not true. There wasn't a lack of pushback. GOP heavily pushed back against this. They're still trying to see if the Supreme Court can overrule this. So this whole, there was a lack of pushback. That's not true. That's not true. Like, okay. Not even just mentioning GOP, even people that are not Republican and may not identify as anything politically per se, the ones who have paid off their student loans, even some of those people were pissed. Again, I agree with student loan debt cancellation, but I think all of it should have been canceled. And when I hear people just tell these lies to make it seem like the promise that Joe Biden gave was the 10 to 20K, that is not the promise that he gave. And your job as the journalist is to push back and correct them when they are wrong. Not smile and coddle them because you want to be their friend.
So I don't know if the White House itself was surprised. I think they've been clearly paying attention to the polls and knew that this was significantly going to be helpful to the president and to the Democrats in general going into this midterms. But I know that some of our colleagues in Congress who said, this would be the end of us, were surprised that there was a minimal pushback, and that the talking points that the Republicans had ultimately fell apart. Now, the only thing that they have left to say is that we've taken away their recruitment tool for recruiting for the military, which is the most ridiculously obvious.
I mean, it's probably true a little bit.
Yeah,
but that's not.
You're not supposed to say it. You shouldn't say that. Yeah,
say that out loud, and like they're telling them themselves. And I think that response in itself is helpful to us, because what we are recognizing, I think, as Democrats collectively, including the president and the administration, is that when we do the right thing in helping working people in this country and the working poor, that those policies really do impact the election, get people on our side. And it is not okay for always to make promises to people and fall short on those promises. And this is, this has to usher in a new era of Democrats fulfilling the promises that they make on the campaign trail when they are given the opportunity to legislate.
Is she serious? Is she serious about campaign promises and keeping your promises? Really? The woman who just approved funding the police, giving more money to the police? Her? She's from Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered. She's going to talk about campaign promises? Really? What happened to Medicare for All, Ilhan Omar? What happened to the push for that? Where were you when it came time to force the vote? Where were you? You're going to talk about campaign promises. It's important that people keep them. You haven't kept your campaign promises. I can't believe this. I can't believe it.
I think we've had a conversation in the past too, where we talked about there's some members of your fellow Democrats who are not always necessarily sincere about being supportive of something, et cetera, et cetera. You say that there are some of your colleagues who were surprised at the lack of pushback. How earnest was their fear of an electoral pushback? And to the extent that they were earnest about that fear, how much do you think that like this example showing them like, hey, this actually is helpful electorally? Like what percentage of those people out there could it actually move in Congress, as opposed to like, I'm saying I'm afraid of the electoral pushback because I really don't like the idea of us not, maintaining the exploitive power of keeping people in debt?
I think a lot of them are earnest in their.
I just have to interrupt here and say you're still keeping people in debt. You're still keeping people in debt. Not everybody had all of their loan wiped out, and I'm one of them. So you're still keeping people in debt, Sam.
Fear that some of these policies, right, that are pushed by young people who are not reliable voters when it comes to elections would create a backlash from their reliable voting base. And so I do hope that, in November, we actually do have a huge turnout in young people voting, so that they can see that that there was an impact in the election by student debt cancellation as well.
And what happens if you don't have that large turnout, Ilhan? Is anybody talking about that? What happens if you don't have that large turnout from young people, which I don't think they will? What happens then? Somebody tell me. I don't know. I know we don't really show up in midterms like that. And when I show up to vote, it's not going to be for any of the national positions. I'm showing up to vote for the local ballot initiatives for my state. That's what I'm showing up to vote for. The hell with Congress.
Well, I mean, and it seems like the White House is kind of starting to understand that this is the time to put your foot on the gas a little bit, because the Republicans, what are they running on? Transphobia and Dr. Seuss, right? Like they're a bit on the back foot. And so I was really happy that in the House, Pelosi and you all prioritized passing legislation like codifying abortion and marriage equality. And right now, Chuck Schumer seems to be kind of trying, and the bipartisan coalition, they seem to be trying to wrangle the votes to hold a vote on marriage equality. Now, I'm a little concerned that Republicans are going to try to stall. I think you should just hold the vote right away and make someone like Ron Johnson say, take a vote on it in a tough election. What's your stance on that? I know that the House you did your job there, but are you hoping that the Senate can just push this through? Because if Republicans want to vote against marriage equality in the year 2022, I want to make them take that vote.
You're asking someone about holding a vote immediately. You're asking this question to someone who didn't force the vote. This is laughable to me. You're talking to her about the sense of urgency for getting a vote out. The same person, and it's not just her, but she's the one that's being interviewed right now. The same person who did not see that sense of urgency when it came to forcing the vote for Medicare for all for everyone in this country during a pandemic. Why are you asking her for her advice about urgency about holding a vote? Am I being too mean? Am I being too harsh, you guys? I'm sorry. I call it like I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think we should make them take the vote, but I certainly also could understand.
We should make them take the vote. We should make them take the vote. We tried to make you take the vote, Ilhan Omar. Remember that? You didn't want to take, you were too scared because you wanted Nancy Pelosi to be your friend. You wanted to be on her team. Now you see she gets Nancy Pelosi's endorsement for her reelection this year. You see how it works? You wanted to be buddy-buddy with Nancy Pelosi. You were too busy focused on that in your career as a politician to care about Medicare for all for people in this country during a time when we had a pandemic to even force the vote for it. But you're going to tell somebody else they need to hold a vote? Okay. We'll see.
And that there is an actual path for it passing, and it would mean a significant deal to so many families that are feeling uncertain right now. Certainly to a lot of the families that I just spoke with at the HRC gala in Minneapolis. This is, my family isn't threatened by it.
You know, it would have been meant a great deal to the people who need health care in this country as well, Ilhan Omar, if you guys would have forced the vote for Medicare for all. That would mean a great deal to a lot of people in this country that don't have health care. But you weren't willing to do it because Nancy Pelosi wouldn't go along with that.
Any legislation that, that we're waiting on. And I know that there are a lot of families who are. And so if there is a path forward in trying to get it codified, I want them to be able to explore that. The new talking point for the Democrats is that we're going to put people over politics. And this is certainly one of those cases where we have to make sure that the politics of the day does not kill legislation that has the ability to become law.
If the Democratic Party is going to put people over politics, then the Democratic Party would stop taking dark money. Then the Democratic Party would stop taking big donor money. They would get money out of electoral politics if they were going to put people first. And Ilhan Omar knows that. Do you see the problem with those progressives going into the Democratic Party?
I don't like the rap that politics is getting in that. Why can't we say electoral politics? Because it's all politics, right? I mean, it's regardless of those 10 Republicans who hopefully will show up after the election, as opposed to before. It's still on, for halfway at least for them a political calculation as to how they're going to vote. But I am with you in that it's sort of like it's a tough decision. You're having to trust that the 10 are going to show up afterwards. And I would imagine, Tammy Baldwin has had conversations that, lead her to believe that that's the best opportunity. She's spearheading that effort in the Senate to the extent that I'm aware of. And it's
and in many ways, it's hard to judge, right? Because I know that it is more personal for her than it is for me. And that's why I started that conversation with that, because for people who many of the policies that we vote on is personal, you have to trust when they tell you I think I can get the votes. Let me try it. And I'm going to trust the senator that she does believe has the votes and wants to give her colleagues the time and the ability to come to that decision.
I have some more questions about legislation, but first I want to just ask about the nurses' strike. Minnesota saw the largest strike of private nurses, I think, in the country
ever.
In the country ever.
Yeah.
Last week. Yes. Okay. And
does he do any research or prep before he does these shows? Because like I covered that nurses strike and I did hella research before it just seems like, is he actually reading articles? Is he doing any type of research, or does he just come on there and just talk and expect other people to answer the questions? And it's just interesting to me.
14 to 15,000 nurses went on strike for 3 days. Give us a sense of like where things stand with that, and what kind of support there was for the nurses there, because this feels like part of a burgeoning sort of reemergence of labor's understanding of their power.
Yeah, having 15,000 nurses go on strike, it was historic and significant. I think it does have a clear impact on the labor.
Wait a minute. He has admitted in the past he don't research like that. It's all off the cuff. What? And he wants to call other people not credible, but he doesn't do any research? Get out of here, man. Get out of here. What a lame
movement. Right now, that power was recognized by executives in the healthcare industry in Minnesota. So they are re-entering negotiations. I hope that they carry out those negotiations in good faith and that nurses get what they are owed. These are people who, without them, the healthcare system wouldn't work. Without them, patients wouldn't get the care that they need. And without them, I don't know where many of us would be when we show up to see care. And so the level of support from all levels of power in Minnesota was tremendous. We had myself, the governor, almost every single person, on the Democrat side, obviously, who holds office, come out on the picket line with them. As someone who's been part of a union who went on strike few times, I don't remember us receiving that level of significant of support. And so I know it made the nurses feel really good that every single person was out there supporting them.
And this is another reason for Medicare for all as well. Let's see if she plugs that.
What's the sense in the general population? Because, I mean, it's a slightly different dynamic. But I just remember maybe we had a subway strike here, or a buses strike. When was it? Like maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago? I can't remember now.
I can't believe this guy. Like, I really can't. I really can't. I can't believe he tried to tell us that we don't know what we're talking about. This guy, who obviously is not doing any research. Wow.
And there was animosity. I mean, at least I don't know what the polling.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just curious as to like, what's your sense of like what the general population, how are they reacting to a strike like that? I guess it was in 2005. I'm old, so I like.
Who listens to this? Like, seriously? You see how some people can do the bare minimum? How some people, they don't have to do any research. They don't have to know the year. They don't have to have the dates. They don't really have to have like any type of prep lined up. And they're given a lot of, the benefit of the doubt because of who they are. You see how this works? What a joke. We're going to fast forward to this portion here.
Everybody wants to see, and there is no reason for there to be a CR that faces the threat of not passing that would ultimately lead to a government shutdown. And again, if we were to be political, this is we're 50 days from the election in November, in a midterm year where we are desperately trying to keep the House and the Senate and continue to pass legislation that will be impactful in people's lives. This is not the time to take that risk. And so I know that many of us who are signatories of that letter have made that clear, and our hope is that leadership listens.
She said it's not the time to take that risk. Let's go back just a little bit. Okay, here we go.
I guess 45, 50 signatories on a letter written by your colleague, Raul Gravala, about the Joe Manchin side deal. This is the permitting deal that he made with Chuck Schumer. They're trying to put it into the continuing resolution. Like, where does that stand now? And really, like, at what point, like, how much, and I imagine this is going to come from the Progressive Caucus, how much of a will is there to sink the continuing resolution in the event that it is stuck into the continuing resolution?
Chairman Grijalva is, as you know, a former chair of the Progressive Caucus. There's a conversation that is continuing to be had with leadership.
Which, by the way, doesn't mean anything anymore. The Progressive Caucus doesn't mean anything anymore. It's lost its whole meaning.
In the House and the Senate to try to make sure that we get a clean CR, keeping the government functioning and open is definitely something I think everybody wants to see. And there is no reason for there to be a CR that faces the threat of not passing that would ultimately lead to a government shutdown. And again, if we were to be political, we're 50 days from the election in November, in a midterm year where we are desperately trying to keep the House and the Senate and continue to pass legislation that will be impactful in people's lives. This is not the time to take that risk. And so I know that many of us who are signatories of that letter have made that clear, and our hope is that leadership listens.
Notice that it's never the time for them to take any risk, though.
Well, I mean, Manchin has burned you guys on your side before in the midst of the negotiations on Build Back Better, which he essentially killed, and the Inflation Reduction Act is the shadow of that. But is there a desire on your guys' part in the CPC to essentially say, hey, you broke your promise on the Senate end. We're not going to cave to this because this is an agreement that Schumer and Manchin made behind closed doors. You did not agree to this. So attaching a pipeline piece of legislation to the continuing resolution to keep the government funded, that you guys had no part of that. So in my opinion, you're under no obligation to agree to it.
Here comes Emma on the defense. You guys had no part in that. It just, so what? They're supposed to be there to fight. Regardless if they were a part of that or not, you still go in and you push back and you fight against it. Another pipeline to be created? Why was that even agreed upon? Didn't I tell you Joe Manchin wouldn't go for that bill unless there was something in it for him? That's the something in it for him. Another pipeline. So how are you going to talk about you have this climate bill that you're about to implement some type of climate reform, and in the same bill, you are actually destroying the environment? Do you see this? Do you see the problem? They literally don't do anything for us. Nothing. It doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican. They do nothing for us. Let me implement this climate reform bill, and at the same time, let me continue to poison the environment. More money for corporations. That's it. That's it. Nothing for us. And of course, Emma has to run cover for her. They have to, because these are the people that they told you to support. This is all they got, guys. All they have is this Justice Democrats model. This is all they've got. So they have to bank on this. They're going to tell you to keep supporting someone like Bernie Sanders if he runs again. They're going to tell you to continue to vote for these progressive Democrats, even though they're doing the bare minimum and they can do so much more and they can leverage their vote, because this is all they have. What a mess. What a mess.
Yeah, and I think that is what the letter makes it clear to leadership, and I think it's important to also understand, right? This is not a funding bill that would have, policies for the future. This is literally seeing the government shut down. And so this is significant. I think it's imperative for leadership to understand what they're putting at risk at this moment.
All right. So
we're going to come out of here. It's such a softball interview. That's what I'm saying. Like, no, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. And I want to show you, I found that that statement I wanted to show you about the promise that Joe Biden made about student loans. Let me share my screen. And you can see it on other sites as well. But I want to make sure I highlight it here really quick. Here we go. I told you. And I showed this on their website as well, the Joe Biden campaign website. This is Joe Biden. This is fact check. Forgive all undergraduate tuition-related federal student debt from 2- and 4-year public colleges and universities and private HBCUs and MSIs for debt holders earning up to $125,000. So bam. Like I said, what she told you was his campaign promise was not his campaign promise. And the fact that Emma and Sam didn't even push back on that, that's suspect. That's suspect. There's a reason why they won't come on here. Yeah, Rokana came on, but he probably won't come back. He probably won't come back. I'm going to do some super chats. Both parties are traitors. Biden waited over a year to cancel student debt, and then he cancels only 10 grand. Are you kidding me? Angela, oh, looky, they're like bestest friends on a Zoom call, not journalists interviewing a representative. Right. Gamer, Ilhan Omar got paid. I love you, Gamer. Gamer is just so straight to the point and direct. Look, she got paid. Thank you for the super chat. Kushranada. The majority report aren't journalists. They're the elitist simp squad. They need the clout, so they bend over for fakes like the fraud squad. You think he'd let a GOP or door slide like he did Ilhan? Brenda, it's hilarious how Sam Seder is harder on Jimmy Dore than he is on politicians who have clearly sold out the working class. Bingo. Thank you so much for the super sticker, JM. And thank you for this super chat, Kush Renata. You're not being hard enough. Their lack of journalism hurts people who are really hurting because they're speaking around the issue on purpose. POS cowards. Thank you, Kush Renata. Sometimes I wonder, am I just being too mean? And thank you for this super chat as well. This is what it looks like when well-off upper middle clowns create lane by pretending they care about poor people issues. Propaganda distributors here, 100%. Dr. Scott said Sabby scared Rokana away. Oh my God. No softball interview here. Sorry, but not happening. I'll take